Last August, I lost an entire bed of dahlias. Not to disease, not to pests. I watered them every single day, and I drowned them. 40 years of gardening, and I still made a mistake that basic. That one painful week taught me more about August watering than a dozen books ever could. So today I want to walk you through the 5 things I do every August without fail. These are the tasks that keep my garden productive through the hottest weeks of summer and set everything up for a gorgeous autumn. We will talk about watering the smart way, so you are not wasting time or killing plants with kindness. We will get into deadheading, which is the easiest way to squeeze weeks of extra flowers out of what you already have growing. I will show you how to stay on top of your vegetable harvest so nothing goes to waste. We will plant for fall, because August is the hidden planting season most people miss entirely. And we will sort out your lawn before the heat does permanent damage. Every one of these takes less effort than you think, and I have found ways to do them that are kind to stiff knees and sore backs, because I deal with those too. Let us start with water, because this is where August gardens are won or lost. The biggest temptation in a hot spell is to grab the hose every afternoon and spray everything down. I did that for years, and my plants looked fine on the surface, but their roots stayed shallow, clustering right near the top of the soil where that daily sprinkle of water sat. The first time I missed a day, those shallow roots had nothing to draw from, and the plants wilted fast. What changed everything for me was switching to deep, infrequent watering. Instead of a little water every day, I give each bed a thorough soak 2 or maybe 3 times a week. I let the water run slowly so it sinks down 8 to 10 inches, rather than pooling on the surface and running off. Those deep drinks pull the roots downward, and a plant with deep roots can survive a missed watering day, or even 2 without looking stressed. Now here is something I wish someone had told me years ago. The time of day you water matters more than the amount. I water early in the morning, before 7 if I can manage it. At that hour the air is cool, the wind is low, and almost all the water goes where it belongs, instead of evaporating off the leaves. Evening watering might seem convenient, but I have had trouble with fungal problems when foliage stays wet overnight. Morning watering gives the leaves time to dry before the sun goes down. If you have physical limitations that make early mornings difficult, a simple soaker hose on a battery timer takes the whole chore off your plate. I bought one for about $15 at a garden center, and it has saved me countless trips with the watering can. For container plants on the patio, August is brutal. A terracotta pot in full sun can dry out completely in a single afternoon. I check my pots by pushing a finger into the soil up to my second knuckle. If it comes out dry, they need water. If there is still moisture down there, I leave them alone. One trick I have used for years is grouping my pots together during heat waves. When they are clustered, they shade each other's sides and the soil stays cooler. It costs nothing, and it works. I also moved most of my containers onto a wheeled plant caddy so I can push them into afternoon shade without lifting anything. Small changes like that make a big difference when your body does not cooperate the way it did at 30. And let me add one more thing about water that I do not see discussed often enough: mulch. A thick layer of mulch, somewhere around 3 inches, keeps the soil dramatically cooler and holds moisture far longer after you water or after it rains. I use shredded bark for my flower beds and straw for the vegetable garden. I have measured the difference with a cheap soil thermometer, and on a hot August day, the mulched soil can be 20 or even 25 degrees cooler than bare ground right next to it. That matters because roots stop working well when soil temperatures climb too high. So before you worry about watering schedules, make sure you have a good mulch layer down. It does half the job for you. Now let us move on to the second task, and this one is probably my favorite because it gives you visible results within days. Deadheading. If you have roses, dahlias, cosmos, zinnias, petunias, or any repeat blooming flower, the spent blossoms need to come off regularly in August. When a flower fades and starts forming a seed head, the plant puts its energy into making seeds instead of making new flowers. By snipping off the dead bloom, you redirect that energy back into producing another round of blossoms. I carry a pair of lightweight bypass pruners in my garden apron pocket every time I go outside in August. Even if I only have 5 minutes, I will walk through and clip whatever has faded since yesterday. It adds up fast. For roses, I cut back to the first leaf set that has 5 leaflets. That is the point where a new flowering shoot is most likely to emerge. For dahlias, I look for the spent bloom and trace the stem down to where it meets a side shoot or a pair of leaves, and that is where I cut. Cosmos and zinnias are more forgiving. You can snip the faded flower head, and a new bud usually appears within a week. The key with deadheading is frequency. A 10-minute walk through the garden every other day does more good than an hour-long session once a week, because you catch the flowers right as they fade, instead of letting the plant commit energy to seeds for days before you intervene. I want to mention one plant that surprises people when I bring it up: lavender. By August, most lavender has finished its main flush of flowers. If you cut the spent flower stalks back by about a third, taking a bit of the leafy growth with them, many varieties will put out a smaller second flush in early autumn. I have had good results with this on English lavender in particular. It also keeps the plant compact and prevents it from getting leggy and woody, which happens fast if you leave the old flower spikes on. Here is an original tip that has served me well. When I deadhead, I keep a bucket with me and I sort the clippings. Anything that has already gone to seed, like marigold heads or cosmos pods, I save in a paper envelope and label it. By the end of August, I have free seed for next year. Everything else goes into the compost bin. This saves money, and on a fixed income, free seed is free seed. I have been growing the same strain of cosmos from saved seed for 6 years running now, and they bloom better each season because they have adapted to my specific garden conditions. That is something store-bought seed cannot give you. Before we move on to the vegetable garden, I am curious about something. Where are you gardening this August? Drop your city, state, or country in the comments below. I always find it fascinating how different August looks depending on whether you are dealing with Arizona heat or a cool Scottish summer. It helps me understand what kind of advice is most useful to this community, and I read every single comment. Now, the third task for August, and this one catches people off guard. You need to harvest your vegetables aggressively. I know that sounds odd. Most of us planted in the spring with the idea that we would pick things when they were ready, and that would be that. But in August, many crops are producing at full speed, and if you do not pick them regularly, the plant slows down or stops producing altogether. This is especially true for zucchini, cucumbers, beans, tomatoes, and peppers. When a zucchini grows to the size of a baseball bat because you missed it for 3 days, the plant reads that as mission accomplished and starts winding down. But if you pick the fruits while they are still young and tender, the plant keeps pushing out new ones because it has not yet succeeded in producing mature seeds. The same principle applies to beans. I pick my green beans every 2 days in August, and they keep coming for weeks. If I let pods mature and dry on the vine, the plant stops flowering. Tomatoes in August need daily attention. I go out each morning and pick anything that has started to color up, even if it is not fully ripe. A tomato that is showing even a blush of pink will ripen perfectly well on the kitchen counter, and getting it off the vine frees up the plant's energy for the next cluster. In my experience, counter-ripened tomatoes taste every bit as good as vine-ripened ones, as long as you picked them after the color started turning. Green tomatoes are a different story. Those need the vine. And while you are checking your tomatoes, keep an eye out for 2 common August problems that worry people far more than they should. The first is blossom end rot, that dark, sunken, leathery patch on the bottom of the fruit. It looks alarming, but it is not a disease. According to university extension research, it is a calcium uptake problem, and in most home gardens the soil has plenty of calcium. The issue is that the plant cannot move calcium to the fruit fast enough when watering is inconsistent. One deep soak followed by 3 dry days followed by another heavy watering creates exactly the kind of moisture swings that trigger it. This is why the deep, regular watering we talked about earlier matters so much for tomatoes specifically. If you see blossom end rot on your first few fruits, pull those tomatoes off so the plant stops wasting energy on them. Later fruit on the same plant often comes through fine once you steady your watering routine. Adding crushed eggshells or lime to the soil at this point will not help, because those materials break down far too slowly to affect fruit that is developing right now. The second common issue is fruit cracking, those splits that radiate out from the stem or circle around the shoulders of the tomato. This happens when the plant takes up a sudden rush of water after a dry spell, and the fruit swells faster than the skin can stretch. A heavy rainstorm after a week of drought is the classic trigger. Mulch helps prevent it because it evens out soil moisture between waterings. If rain is in the forecast and you have nearly ripe tomatoes on the vine, pick them early at what growers call the breaker stage, when color is starting to show, but the fruit is not yet fully ripe. They will finish ripening indoors and you will avoid the cracking. I store mine in a single layer on the counter, not in the refrigerator. Cold temperatures dull the flavor. One thing I have added to my August routine in the last few years is keeping a harvest journal. Nothing fancy. I use a small notebook by the back door and jot down what I picked each day and roughly how much. Over time, this has helped me figure out which varieties perform best in my garden and which ones are not worth the space. Last year, I realized I was giving away most of my cherry tomatoes because I had planted 4 plants and only needed 2. This year, I used that extra space for peppers, and the difference in what I can actually eat and use has been noticeable. A harvest journal takes 30 seconds a day, and it saves you from repeating the same planting mistakes year after year. Now I want to talk about something I get asked about constantly at this time of year. What do you do with the glut? When you have more tomatoes or zucchini than you can eat, there is a temptation to let the extras rot on the vine. Please do not do that. Rotting fruit attracts pests and disease. Instead, pick everything and give the extras away to neighbors. Bring them to a community center. Or if you have a chest freezer, blanch and freeze vegetables like beans and peppers for winter. I freeze sliced zucchini on a sheet pan and then bag it up. It is not as crisp as fresh, but it is excellent in soups and stews come January, when you are craving something homegrown. The 4th August task is one that excites me every year, and most gardeners have no idea they should be doing it. Planting for fall. August is not the end of the growing season. It is the start of a second one. Cool weather vegetables that struggled in the heat of June and July grow beautifully when planted now for an autumn harvest. I am talking about lettuce, spinach, radishes, kale, carrots, beets, and broccoli. These crops prefer cooler temperatures and shorter days, and when you plant them in August, they mature during September and October when the conditions are ideal. The timing varies depending on where you live. A general rule I follow is to count backward from my expected first frost date. Most seed packets tell you how many days to maturity. I add about 2 weeks to that number because autumn days are shorter and growth slows down. Then I count back from the frost date, and that tells me when to plant. For example, if my first frost is around mid-October and I want to grow radishes that mature in 30 days, I would plant them in early September at the latest, but I prefer to plant in August to give myself a buffer in case germination is slow. Starting seeds in August heat can be tricky because the soil temperature is often too warm for cool season crops. Lettuce seed, for instance, goes dormant when soil temperatures climb above about 80 degrees Fahrenheit. What I do is start my fall seeds in trays in a shaded spot, under the patio table, or on the north side of the house, where direct sun does not hit. I keep the trays moist, and once the seedlings are an inch or 2 tall, I transplant them into the garden in late afternoon, so they have the whole cool night to settle in before the next day's heat. Raised beds are particularly good for fall planting because you can refresh the soil quickly. I pull out any spent summer crops, add a couple inches of compost, scratch it into the top layer with a hand fork, and the bed is ready for new seeds or transplants within an hour. If you have never tried growing a second round of vegetables, August is the time to start. The results have surprised me more than once. Some of my best lettuce harvests have come from September and October plantings, when the leaves are sweet and tender in the cooler air, and the slugs and aphids are less active than they were in spring. One thing worth knowing about fall crops is that they often taste better than their spring counterparts. Leafy greens like kale and spinach develop more sugars when they mature in cooler temperatures, and some gardeners even leave kale in the ground through a light frost or two because the cold sweetens the flavor. Carrots respond the same way. A carrot that sizes up in the warmth of late summer and then finishes in the cool of October develops a sweetness that spring carrots rarely match. So if you have ever been disappointed by homegrown carrots tasting bland, try an August sowing and harvest them late. The difference can be striking. For those of you wondering which fall crops are the most forgiving for a first attempt, I would point you toward radishes and lettuce. Radishes germinate fast, often within a week, and they are ready to eat in about a month. That quick turnaround gives you confidence and a visible reward for the effort. Lettuce is almost as easy, and if you choose a cut-and-come-again variety, you can harvest outer leaves over several weeks rather than pulling the whole plant at once. One more thing about fall planting that I want to emphasize. If you grow herbs, August is the time to take cuttings from rosemary, thyme, and sage. These cuttings root well in a glass of water on a sunny windowsill, and by the time autumn arrives, you have new little plants to pot up and bring indoors for winter. I keep rosemary cuttings going every year this way, and I have not bought a rosemary plant from a nursery in over a decade. Snip a 4-inch piece from the tip of a healthy stem, strip the leaves from the bottom 2 inches, and set it in water. Change the water every few days, and you should see roots within 2 to 3 weeks. And here is a bonus tip on fall planting that has saved me considerable frustration. If you are direct sowing seeds into the ground in August, lay a piece of damp burlap or an old cotton bedsheet over the row after planting. This keeps the soil moist and a few degrees cooler, which improves germination rates in hot weather. Check under it daily and remove the cover as soon as you see green sprouts poking through. I have had germination rates close to double with this method, compared to leaving the soil bare in the August sun. The fifth and final task for August is your lawn, and I know this is the one many of us would rather ignore when it is hot outside. But a little attention now prevents a lot of problems later. The most common mistake I see in August is cutting the grass too short. When temperatures are high, your lawn handles heat stress better if the grass blades are longer. I keep my mower set to about 3 inches during the summer months. Taller grass shades the soil underneath, which keeps the roots cooler and reduces how much water evaporates. It also crowds out weeds because less sunlight reaches the soil surface where weed seeds sit waiting to sprout. If your lawn has dry brown patches, resist the urge to panic. Most established lawns go dormant in extreme heat as a survival mechanism. The grass is not dead, it is sleeping. It will green up again when temperatures drop and rain returns in autumn. Overwatering a dormant lawn does not speed recovery and can cause more harm than good if the soil stays soggy. The exception is newly seeded or newly sodded areas from earlier in the year. Those do need consistent moisture because their root systems are not developed enough to go dormant and bounce back. There is an important distinction here between a lawn that has gone dormant and one that is dying from disease or grub damage. A dormant lawn turns brown evenly across large patches, and the grass blades feel dry but tough. If you see irregular brown spots, especially ones that peel back from the soil when you tug on them, that can indicate grubs feeding on the roots underneath. Grub damage tends to show up in late summer when the larvae are actively eating. If you suspect grubs, pull back a section of turf in the brown area and look for white C-shaped larvae in the top few inches of soil. A few are normal, but if you are finding 10 or more per square foot, Treatment may be worth considering. I mention this because I have seen gardeners water a grub-damaged lawn all August, thinking it was heat stress, and the extra moisture made the grub problem worse. One thing I do in late August that pays dividends in September is aerating compacted areas. If you have spots where the soil has become hard and water runs off, instead of soaking in, a simple garden fork pushed into the ground every 6 inches opens up channels for air and water to reach the roots. You do not need an expensive aerating machine. A fork works fine for small areas, and it is gentle enough that you can do it without tearing up the grass. I focus on high-traffic areas near paths and garden gates, where the soil gets compressed from foot traffic. For those of you with flower borders alongside the lawn, August is a good time to neaten up the edges. I use a half-moon edging tool and cut a clean line where the grass meets the bed. Sharp edges make the whole garden look tidy, and they prevent grass runners from creeping into your flower beds. I do this once in August and once more in late September, and that is enough to keep things looking crisp. If you are dealing with weeds in the lawn, hand pulling is more effective in August than any other month because the soil is often dry enough that the whole root comes out cleanly. I keep a bucket and a long-handled weeding tool by the back door and pull 10 or 15 weeds every time I walk past. It takes 2 minutes and prevents them from seeding. One dandelion left to flower can scatter hundreds of seeds across your lawn, and each one of those is a potential new weed next spring. I also want to say something about what not to do with your lawn in August. Avoid heavy fertilizing. Pushing growth with nitrogen during peak heat stresses the grass and can burn it. If your lawn needs feeding, late September or early October is a far better time in most climates. And avoid reseeding bare patches now, unless you can keep them consistently moist. Grass seed needs steady moisture to germinate, and the August heat makes that difficult without constant attention. Mark the bare spots, and plan to reseed them in early autumn, when conditions are much more cooperative. Let me circle back to something that ties all 5 of these tasks together, and it is something I feel strongly about. Pace yourself. August gardening is not a marathon. When you are over 60, the heat hits different. I garden in the morning before 10, and again in the evening after 5, and I stay inside during the hottest part of the day. I wear a wide-brimmed hat, keep a water bottle in my garden trug, and I sit down whenever I need to. I have a little folding stool that I carry around the garden, and I am not the least bit embarrassed about it. The garden will wait for you. There is no prize for pushing through heat exhaustion, and a trip to the emergency room is not worth a weed-free border. I also want to mention something about tools that has made my August gardening much easier. I switched to lightweight, ergonomic versions of my most used tools a few years ago. My bypass pruners weigh half what the old ones did, and they have a rotating handle that reduces strain on my wrist. My watering wand has an extended reach, so I do not have to bend over containers. These are not luxury items. They are practical investments that let me keep doing what I love without paying for it, with aching joints the next day. If your budget is tight, look at your most used tool first and upgrade that one. You do not need to replace everything at once. So let me pull this together with something you can do today, this afternoon, before the sun goes down. Walk through your garden with a pair of pruners and a bucket. Deadhead everything that has faded. Pick any vegetables that are ripe or close to ripe. Pull 5 weeds. And while you are out there, take a look at your beds and ask yourself which ones will be empty by September. Those are your fall planting spots. Grab a seed packet of lettuce or radishes next time you are near a garden center and get them started before the month is out. That one small step will extend your growing season by weeks. And come October, when you are eating salad from your own garden while the neighbor's beds sit empty, you will be glad you did it. That is August gardening. 5 tasks, none of them complicated, all of them worth doing. And if you take nothing else from this, remember the dahlia bed I lost. Water deeply, water early, water less often. Your plants will thank you for it, and so will your knees.